A billionaire, exhausted from work and suspicious of strange things happening inside his own home, secretly installed a hidden camera because he believed his maid might be making mistakes he could no longer ignore. But he never imagined that the footage would reveal something far more disturbing: his own fiancée behaving in shocking, frightening, and unforgivable ways with his vulnerable baby while no one else was watching. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. Richard was overwhelmed with work and with the responsibility of raising Andrew, and his days felt long and heavy. Every morning he tried to organize himself, but there was always something waiting for him that he had not finished the day before. Because of that, the house only stayed in order thanks to Grace. She handled tasks before Richard even realized they existed, and she made the environment feel stable. She was not only careful with cleaning and cooking, she paid attention to every detail, always watching Andrew, checking the doors, noticing when something had changed. It was clear she had lived through situations that taught her to stay alert, although she never described anything openly. Richard respected her because she kept things running when he was too tired to think straight, and because she helped Andrew feel safe. Without her, the house would easily fall into chaos, and Richard knew it. Even when she stayed quiet, her silence felt strong, as if she understood much more than she allowed herself to comment on. She brought a sense of calm at a time when Richard felt constantly pressured, almost like she filled the emotional gaps he could not handle himself. When Megan appeared, charming and powerful, Richard felt hope rise inside him in a way he had not felt for a long time. She presented herself with confidence, clear goals, and the kind of presence that made people immediately pay attention. For Richard, who had been feeling stuck and exhausted, Megan seemed like a new beginning, someone who could bring motivation into his tiring routine. But Andrew reacted differently from the moment he saw her. He became restless, answering questions with short words, looking around as if something bothered him deeply. Richard tried to explain his behavior as simple shyness, but it was not convincing even to himself. Megan smiled perfectly the entire time, never showing annoyance, speaking in a friendly tone, as if nothing strange was happening. However, there was an uncomfortable tension in the air, something Richard tried to ignore because he wanted things to work. Andrew's discomfort didn't go unnoticed by Grace. She watched him quietly, paying attention to every small movement, every shift in his eyes. She knew Andrew well enough to recognize when his reactions came from fear rather than simple awkwardness. At the same time, her attention kept returning to Megan. Grace didn't stare openly, but her glances were precise and thoughtful. She took in Megan's posture, the way she entered each room, and how she responded to Andrew's unusual behavior. Grace never trusted easily, and she preferred to rely on what she observed rather than what people said about themselves. While Megan continued smiling, Grace noticed tiny inconsistencies, something slightly off that she couldn't immediately explain. It wasn't anything obvious, but it was enough to make her stay cautious. She had seen too many situations where a pleasant first impression hid something else. Richard, unaware of Grace's deeper concerns, tried to behave normally, even though he too felt a faint pressure he couldn't fully identify. He wanted Megan to feel welcome because he believed her presence could improve his life and maybe help fill an emotional emptiness he had been carrying for years. He tried to involve Andrew in the conversation, hoping to ease the atmosphere, but the boy kept giving short answers and avoiding Megan's eyes. This made Richard even more nervous, and he found himself watching Megan closely as well. The more he tried to ignore the strange tone of the meeting, the more he felt that something unseen was influencing everything. His desire for things to finally get better was strong, but his instincts whispered that he should pay attention. Still, he didn't want to jump to conclusions, so he focused on being polite and maintaining a calm face. Megan continued acting with confidence, as if nothing affected her. She walked through the house, made comments about its structure, and praised Andrew as if she found him interesting, even though he hardly interacted. Her voice stayed steady, and her expressions looked perfectly controlled. This almost added to the discomfort, because she seemed unaffected by the tension in the room. Grace followed her quietly, pretending to be occupied with small tasks, but staying close enough to listen and observe. Andrew stuck close to Grace whenever possible, showing clearly whom he trusted more. Richard felt caught between relief and doubt. On one hand, he wanted to believe Megan was genuinely good for him. On the other hand, the uneasiness in the environment was too strong to ignore. He kept studying her tone, her gestures, and the way she spoke to Andrew, trying to understand why everything felt so different from what he had expected. The situation intensified when Megan attempted to interact more directly with Andrew, bending slightly to talk to him with a soft smile. Andrew immediately withdrew, stepping back without hesitation. It was not a childish reaction, it was a clear, instinctive response, as if he sensed something he couldn't explain. Richard tried to laugh it off, but Grace's expression changed subtly. She didn't confront anyone, didn't raise her voice, and didn't show open suspicion, yet her eyes locked on Megan with firm attention. There was something in Megan's presence that did not match the peace the house usually had. Grace could feel it clearly, like a small imbalance disrupting everything she normally maintained so carefully. Megan noticed Grace's watchfulness, but continued acting fully in control, keeping her pleasant smile even when Andrew avoided her entirely. The tension grew more obvious, even though no one addressed it directly. By the end of the encounter, the house was still calm on the surface, but an invisible pressure lingered in every room. Richard kept trying to convince himself that everything would be fine, but Andrew's reactions stayed heavy in his mind. Andrew refused to get near Megan again and kept close to Grace, who stayed silent but alert. Megan, with her perfect smile, behaved as though nothing strange had happened. Still, Grace watched her with the same discreet caution from the beginning, sensing something subtly out of place, something that didn't match the atmosphere she worked so hard to protect inside the house. The public, just like Grace, could already feel that there was something behind Megan's presence, something not yet revealed, but strong enough to disturb even the calm routine the family tried to maintain. Richard, emotionally fragile after his last relationship, had no idea that the situation inside his own house was beginning to shift in a quiet but dangerous way. Megan had started making small comments about Grace, always sounding light and harmless, as if she were only trying to be helpful or share an opinion with no real intention behind it. She never spoke loudly or aggressively. Instead, she chose moments when Richard seemed tired or distracted, and then she would mention something about how Grace might be too controlling or a bit strange sometimes. These comments seemed small, but they came from a deeper goal Megan carried. She needed to remove anyone who could interfere with her financial plans involving Richard. She was careful, choosing words that sounded innocent, but each one had weight. Grace, who kept the house running smoothly, noticed the tone, even if Richard didn't. But Megan always wore a friendly smile, making everything she said look completely reasonable at first glance, and that made the situation even harder to confront. Even though she maintained a sweet appearance most of the time, Megan occasionally revealed another side when she thought no one was paying attention. In short moments of distraction, her expression changed. Her eyebrows tightened, her jaw stiffened, and a cold look passed through her eyes. It appeared only for seconds, but it was enough to show irritation and impatience. Grace caught these moments more than once. While Megan spoke with charm to Richard, she moved objects around the house in strange ways, leaving things slightly out of place. Grace would enter a room and find something moved without reason, a cup, a key, a book. It wasn't enough to accuse anyone, but it created a constant feeling that something was off. Megan's stories also had inconsistencies. She would say one thing on one day and something different on the next. Grace tried to stay calm, observing everything quietly, because she knew that reacting too quickly would only make her look unreasonable. Richard, still affected by the pain of his past relationship, was the perfect target for the strategies Megan used. She noticed his insecurities immediately and adapted her behavior to fit what he needed. When he seemed lonely, she acted loving. When he expressed frustration, she showed support. And when he started doubting himself, she positioned herself as someone who understood him better than anyone else. These small gestures were calculated, but looked natural enough to pass as genuine care. Grace watched as Richard began depending more on Megan's opinions and less on his own. Megan knew exactly when to show concern and when to create emotional pressure. She also knew how to subtly make Richard feel guilty if he didn't give her enough attention, using a quiet tone and carefully chosen words. Every step brought him closer to her. Megan's tactics also involved making herself look vulnerable whenever it benefited her. On certain days, she would pretend to be upset about something minor, saying she felt misunderstood or unappreciated. Richard, trying to be supportive, would comfort her and reassure her. This created a pattern where Megan played the role of someone who needed protection, and Richard stepped into the role of caretaker. Megan understood how to use this dynamic in her favor. She also acted as though she worried about Grace being overworked, a comment that seemed kind on the surface, but slowly created distance between them. By presenting herself as someone who cared about the household, she made Richard think she was simply trying to help. Grace noticed that these moments always happened when Richard was vulnerable, never when he was confident, showing that Megan timed everything carefully. Meanwhile, the atmosphere in the house began to shift. Grace felt the tension building, even though there were no open confrontations. She continued doing her work with the same dedication, but Megan's careful manipulations made each day feel heavier. Grace kept noticing little changes. Things moved from their place, conversations twisted slightly to make her look less reliable, and Richard becoming more defensive of Megan without realizing why. These were not big events, but rather a series of small disruptions that slowly changed the environment. The trust that once existed in the house started to weaken, especially between Richard and Grace. Megan's subtle influence grew stronger each day, while Grace found herself being pushed further into the background, unable to prove anything but certain that something was deeply wrong. As Megan continued shaping the situation to her advantage, Richard became increasingly attached to her presence. Everything she did seemed perfectly timed. A sympathetic comment, a gentle touch on his arm, a worried expression that appeared only when he looked upset. Grace could see the pattern clearly, but from Richard's perspective, Megan was simply supportive and caring. This emotional dependence Megan created made it easier for her to distance Grace from Richard. Whenever Grace tried to offer a logical explanation or raise a concern, Megan would act confused or hurt, making Richard feel that Grace was overreacting. Each detail, from Megan's tone to her carefully chosen expressions, brought Richard closer to her and slowly pushed Grace away. By the time these changes became noticeable, the damage was already spreading quietly through the house, opening the first cracks in the stability that once existed there. The manipulative accusations increased, always repeating the same idea of taking care of the family, protecting Andrew, as if Megan were the only one capable of seeing danger. She spoke softly, but her words carried a tone that suggested something serious was happening. She pointed out small details and turned them into examples of supposed irresponsibility from Grace. Each time she mentioned something, she acted as if she were doing it for Andrew's safety or for the well-being of the house. Richard, already struggling with doubts and emotional insecurity, became trapped between what he believed to be logical and what Megan insisted was a risk. His fear of repeating mistakes from the past made him more sensitive to Megan's warnings. Megan took advantage of this, presenting herself as someone who noticed things others ignored. She made Richard believe that he had been overlooking important signs. Grace watched these conversations from a distance, unable to defend herself without sounding defensive. The atmosphere grew heavier as Megan continued planting doubts in Richard's mind. Richard finally gave in when Megan performed a scene showing serious mistakes that she claimed Grace had made. She exaggerated every situation, even moving objects beforehand to create a false picture. Richard, confused and pressured, accepted her version of events. What the audience now clearly sees is that Megan placed the objects on purpose when no one was watching. She waited for the right moment to call Richard into the room and point out the supposed disorder or mistake. She spoke with a calm but firm voice, making everything appear urgent. Richard, unable to process everything at once, began trusting her perceptions over his own. Megan's strategy worked perfectly. Every accusation seemed supported by physical evidence she herself had created. Grace could not explain why things appeared wrong. She knew she had not made those mistakes, but she had no way to prove what Megan was doing behind the scenes. Grace, realizing that something was very wrong, tried carefully to understand Megan's actions. She moved through the house, paying close attention to details that she would normally overlook. She began noticing patterns. Objects were only moved when Megan was alone in a room. Comments Megan made did not match the actual routine of the house, and some of her reactions did not match Andrew's needs or behavior. Grace spent more time observing silently, trying to gather information without being noticed. She checked the same rooms several times during the day to see if something had been changed again. She watched Megan's expressions when she thought no one was looking. Grace felt the tension rising, but she stayed calm enough to keep track of everything. She knew Megan was creating a false narrative, but she needed something solid to confront it. The problem was that Megan always seemed to be one step ahead, covering her tracks and acting innocent whenever Richard entered a room. Even when Grace got close to understanding one of Megan's tricks, Megan acted faster. She manipulated conversations, changed her tone, or placed objects back before Grace could show anything to Richard. Every attempt Grace made to defend herself was interrupted or invalidated by a new accusation. Megan spoke with confidence, making it look like she was trying to help, while Grace was painted as someone who could not be trusted. These moments left Grace feeling trapped, because she knew exactly what was happening, but had no way to expose it without sounding guilty. Megan always appeared calm, collected, and perfectly reasonable, which made Richard lean toward her explanations again and again. The situation became unbearable as Megan's influence increased, and Grace's voice grew weaker inside the house. The emotional distance created between Richard and Grace was devastating for her. Richard had once trusted her completely, but now he questioned her actions and even her intentions. His uncertainty cut deeply, not because of anger, but because Grace cared genuinely for the family and had always done her best to support them. Now she was being judged for things she had not done. The way Richard looked at her changed. He hesitated before speaking and sometimes avoided meeting her eyes. Grace felt each of these small changes like silent blows. Despite the pain, she forced herself to stay strong enough to understand what Megan wanted. The more Megan pushed her away, the clearer it became that all of this was part of a plan. Grace could not compete with Megan's manipulative tactics by raising her voice or arguing. Instead, she tried to remain patient, hoping she could find a way to show the truth. This emotional collapse awakened something new inside Grace, something quiet but powerful. She did not explode or fight openly. Instead, a silent determination formed within her. She decided she would not give up, even if everyone believed Megan for now. She continued watching carefully, memorizing Megan's behavior, tracking every small inconsistency, and waiting for the moment when the truth would reveal itself. Though she felt wounded and pushed aside, she refused to let Megan destroy everything she had built with Richard and Andrew. The chapter ends with this change inside Grace. She is emotionally shattered, yet more determined than ever, ready to face whatever Megan planned next. Richard installed the camera, but once it was finally set up, he found himself hesitating before watching anything it recorded. At first, He believed checking the footage would give him clarity and help him understand what was happening between Grace and Megan. But as soon as he sat in front of the device, a knot formed in his stomach. He feared discovering something terrible, something he wouldn't be able to ignore afterward. His hand hovered over the play button more than once before he pulled it back, unsure if he was ready for the truth. Meanwhile, the tension inside the house became entirely psychological. There were no loud arguments, no visible fights, but the silence and the careful movements between them were heavier than open conflict. Megan's behavior around Andrew shifted day by day, growing more unsettling. She wasn't openly violent, but her way of taking care of him raised increasing concern. Richard kept telling himself he was imagining things, yet deep down he knew something was changing, and not for the better. Megan began showing clear signs of irritation that never fully broke into anger, but stayed tense beneath her fake smile. She often pressed her lips together, or gripped Andrew's clothes too tightly, or made small comments that suggested she wanted total control over the house and the people in it. Her need for control appeared in simple actions. She corrected others over minor details, insisted on doing everything her own way, and reacted sharply when someone questioned her. She also seemed to enjoy humiliating Grace, even if she did it subtly. She used jokes, comments disguised as kindness, or exaggerated concerns that made Grace look irresponsible. Each time, Megan's expression revealed a quiet satisfaction, as if putting Grace down gave her power. Her emotional coldness with children, especially Andrew, was also becoming clearer. She held him without warmth, handled him with impatience, and forced smiles that didn't match her eyes. Anyone paying close attention could see something was wrong. Grace tried several times to get close to Andrew, hoping to comfort him or simply check if he was all right. She approached gently, calling his name softly or offering to help with small tasks. But Megan intercepted her every time, moving quickly and acting as if she had misunderstood Grace's intention. She claimed Grace was creating confusion or trying to interfere unnecessarily. She made it seem like Grace was forcing interactions that Andrew didn't want, or that she was stepping into a role Megan insisted belonged only to her. These interruptions became more frequent and more obvious. Grace felt frustrated, but tried not to show it. She knew reacting angrily would only give Megan more reasons to accuse her. Still, the way Megan positioned herself between her and the baby made Grace feel pushed out, like she was being erased from the household she had helped maintain. The tension grew until Megan's behavior reached a dangerous level. One afternoon, driven by a strange mix of excitement and cruelty, she began playing with Andrew in a way that was far from safe. Her voice sounded cheerful, but her movements were too rough and unpredictable. She justified everything by saying she was just being playful, but underneath the act was a clear emotional instability. Andrew showed signs of discomfort, moving away and whining softly, but Megan didn't stop. Instead, she laughed as if nothing was wrong and continued pushing the situation further. Her eyes had a shine that didn't match the tone of her voice, almost like she was getting some kind of thrill from ignoring the child's reactions. It was clear that this wasn't simple playtime, but something unsettling and dangerous, disguised as fun. The moment became even more dramatic when Grace walked in at the exact time Megan crossed a line. Grace froze for a second, shocked at what she was seeing, and then rushed forward, pleading for Megan to stop. Her voice was full of fear and desperation, not anger. She begged her to put Andrew down carefully, to stop treating the baby like a toy. But Megan didn't react the way a normal person would. Instead of feeling embarrassed or recognizing the danger, she acted as if she were untouchable. She ignored Grace's pleas, pretending not to hear them, or simply choosing not to respond. Her smile stayed fixed, too controlled, too confident, like she believed Grace had no power to challenge her. Grace's fear and Megan's indifference created a painful contrast, filling the room with a heavy tension that made the scene even harder to bear. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. Grace saw the truth of Megan's instability, the danger she posed, and the complete disregard she had for the people around her. Megan acted boldly, as if nothing and no one could stop her. Grace continued begging, her voice cracking, her hands trembling as she tried to protect Andrew without escalating the situation. The baby's discomfort grew more visible, and Grace felt every second stretch into something unbearable. Richard wasn't there to witness the moment, and that made everything worse. Grace knew Megan would twist the story afterward, painting herself as innocent and Grace as dramatic. Yet she couldn't step back, not when Andrew was at risk. The chapter closes on this intense moment, Grace desperately pleading, Megan ignoring her entirely, and the danger hanging in the air with no immediate solution. Richard finally decided to watch the videos, but as soon as he pressed play, the emotional impact hit him harder than he expected. He had prepared himself to see something uncomfortable, yet the reality on the screen was far more disturbing. The first seconds already showed a version of Megan he had never allowed himself to notice before. She looked cold, with sharp expressions that revealed irritation every time Andrew cried or moved in a way she didn't like. Her impatience was visible in the way she tapped her fingers, tightened her jaw, or rolled her eyes when she thought no one was watching. Richard felt his chest tighten as he watched these moments, realizing they were not isolated incidents but patterns he had ignored. Each clip made him feel smaller, more ashamed, as he understood how easily he had been manipulated. He paused the video several times, needing air, but forced himself to continue because he knew he had to face the truth fully. The next recordings were even more painful. He watched Megan laughing at Andrew's tears, reacting to his fear as if it was something amusing. She held him roughly, pretending it was playful, but her tone and movements clearly showed a lack of empathy. Richard felt sick watching her smile at the wrong moments, enjoying control rather than showing care. Andrew's face, wet from crying, appeared again and again in the footage, and each time Richard felt the guilt build inside him. Megan's laughter had once sounded charming to him, but here it was, twisted, cold, and completely detached from the needs of a child. He leaned forward toward the screen, unable to understand how he had ever missed these signs. The contrast between the image he had formed of Megan and the reality in the videos made him feel betrayed, not just by her, but by his own judgment. Another set of clips showed Megan alone with Andrew, acting with clear brutality the moment she believed no one was watching. She pulled him sharply, handled him without care, and reacted to minor noises with growing frustration. She spoke to him in a tone that carried irritation, even though he was too young to understand her words. Richard felt a wave of horror as he saw Megan lift Andrew in a way that was far from safe. The calm mask she used around Richard and others disappeared completely when she was alone. Richard's breathing grew heavier as he realized how close his son had been to real harm. He paused the footage again, covering his face with his hands, blaming himself for not seeing the truth sooner. The silence in the room made the scenes feel even heavier, echoing the reality he had refused to accept. Then came the parts where Grace appeared. In every video she was calm, careful, and attentive. She moved slowly around Andrew, always making sure he was comfortable, always speaking gently. Even when the environment was tense, she stayed focused on protecting him. She picked up objects Megan had moved, fixed things without complaining, and watched the baby with genuine affection. These images contradicted everything Richard had allowed himself to believe in the past weeks. Grace had never acted out of frustration or impatience. Her behavior had always been steady and reliable. Seeing her kindness contrasted directly with Megan's hostility made the truth impossible to ignore. Richard felt a heavy weight in his chest as he realized he had doubted the one person who had been consistently good to Andrew from the beginning. The final videos revealed small manipulations Megan had done around the house, objects she deliberately moved, items she placed out of order, situations she created just to accuse Grace later. Watching them play out step by step was devastating. Richard saw Megan look around to make sure no one was watching, move something only a few inches, and then later present it as proof of Grace's supposed mistakes. The lies were so calculated that Richard understood he had never stood a chance against her manipulations. Every accusation, every complaint, every concerned comment had been carefully staged. Realizing this destroyed what little confidence he had left in his own perception. He began to question not just his decisions, but his entire ability to judge people. Each video not only exposed Megan's lies, but also shattered Richard emotionally. He saw how she had preyed on his vulnerability, using his fears and insecurities as tools to control him. The scenes didn't just prove deception, they showed emotional betrayal at a deep level. And the most painful part was the clear evidence of what could have happened if Grace had not been there. Grace had protected Andrew when Richard failed to see what was happening. Watching these moments made Richard feel an intense horror. He realized that his doubts, hesitation, and trust in Megan had almost cost his son's safety. The guilt was overwhelming, and for the first time, he truly understood the damage caused by his blindness. Richard called the police immediately, his hands shaking as he spoke, still shaken from everything he had seen in the videos. When the officers arrived, Megan tried to switch the situation in her favor as quickly as possible. She burst into tears, grabbed her own arms as if she needed support, and claimed she was being mistreated. Her voice trembled, and she spoke fast, acting desperate and terrified. She insisted that she had only ever tried to protect the family, and that Grace was the one causing instability. She blamed stress, exhaustion, and misunderstandings, but this time, her performance did not work. Richard no longer believed her, and the officers could see that something was off in the way she changed her expressions too quickly. While she cried loudly, she occasionally slipped into a cold, angry stare before snapping back into her emotional act. These cracks in her behavior made it clear the tears were a strategy, not genuine fear. No matter how much she insisted she was innocent, the mask she had worn for so long was breaking apart right in front of everyone. As her desperation grew, Megan started revealing things she had never meant to expose. She complained loudly about how much she had invested in Richard, how she deserved something for her efforts, and how unfair it was that everything she planned was falling apart. Her words hinted at a financial motivation behind all her actions, something she tried to hide before. She also mentioned old resentments, speaking about how people always got in her way and how she was tired of being treated as if she didn't matter. In her frantic state, she even referred to Richard's ex-companion in a way that suggested a possible connection or shared bitterness. Though she didn't go into detail, her tone made it clear that she had been influenced by more than just her interest in Richard. By the time the police escorted her out, she was no longer pretending to be the perfect partner. Her true intentions had finally surfaced, exposing the manipulation she had been hiding from the start. After Megan was removed from the house, Richard and Grace were left facing the aftermath. The silence felt different now, not tense, but heavy, filled with exhaustion and hurt. They both wanted harmony again, but they understood it wouldn't return overnight. Grace had been deeply wounded by everything that happened. Even though the truth was out, the emotional damage remained. When she returned, she moved through the house carefully, as if afraid of doing something wrong. She avoided direct eye contact at times and spoke more softly than usual. Richard didn't pressure her. He knew she needed time to heal. He carried his own guilt, aware that he had failed to protect both Andrew and Grace when they needed him. He approached her gently, speaking honestly, admitting his mistakes and showing a vulnerability he had never expressed so openly before. Their interactions were careful, filled with unspoken apologies and slow attempts to rebuild trust. Andrew reacted immediately to Grace's presence. As soon as he saw her again, he reached for her without hesitation, clinging to her arms with relief. His face brightened and his body relaxed, as if he recognized that the person who had kept him safe was finally back. This reaction strengthened what everyone already knew. Grace had always been his true source of protection. Her calm way of holding him, her steady voice, and her consistent care reassured him in a way no one else could. For Grace, this moment was both comforting and painful. Comforting because Andrew still trusted her completely, and painful because she realized how close he had been to danger. She held him tightly, promising herself that she would never allow anything like this to happen again. Her bond with Andrew made the path toward healing a little clearer, even if it was still long. Richard did everything he could to repair the damage. He apologized, not with grand gestures, but with steady actions. He helped more around the house, listened more carefully, and made sure Grace never felt alone in the daily responsibilities again. He became more transparent and open, sharing his worries instead of hiding them. Grace appreciated his efforts, though she still carried scars from the situation. Their conversations became deeper, more honest, and more intentional. Slowly, the emotional distance between them began to shrink. Richard worked to rebuild her trust not through pressure, but through patience. He accepted her hesitations, understanding they were the result of real hurt. Their connection didn't return instantly, but day by day, they built something new, something more grounded and real than before. The house eventually became safe again. The tension that once filled the rooms faded, replaced by a quieter, more mature atmosphere. But nothing returned exactly to how it was before. Everyone had changed. Richard had become more self-aware, less proud, and more attentive. Grace had gained strength through her pain, learning to trust herself even when others doubted her. Andrew, though too young to understand everything, responded to the calmer energy around him. Still, the sense remained that this healing came with a cost. They had all grown, but they had grown through hardship. The harmony they rebuilt was real, but marked by the memory of what happened. The chapter ends with the home finally stable again, yet shaped forever by the emotional scars that taught them to protect each other more carefully from now on. Finally, we've reached the end of this story. I'm extremely happy that you've made it this far. Thank you very much for watching. Comment below what you thought and what was the best or worst part. Don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.